All right, hello everyone. Welcome to Automate and Integrate with Quicksilver. In this workshop, we learn all about the different ways that you can take existing Pantheon workflows and basically interact with third-party APIs based on what happens in those workflows. So today we're going to be taking a look at some examples. We're going to learn how to write your own example if you'd like to run through that yourself. And we're also going to kind of get some gotchas, some things you should know about how Quicksilver actually works. Before we do that, though, let's go through a quick introduction. Actually, I don't have an intro slide on this one, but hello, my name is David Needham. I'm a developer advocate at Pantheon. And the majority of what I do at Pantheon revolves around training. I love teaching people things. I love helping people find success quickly. And so as part of that, I work on our training programs. I help create new material. I help improve our material over time. And occasionally I get the pleasure of also leading workshops like I am here today. So there are many ways you can participate. We are live streaming this today. We have folks on Zoom. We also have folks on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook. So regardless, wherever you are right now, if you have a question, if you want to say hello, just put a little message in your chat window, your comment window. It might be called something different depending on where you are. I will be able to see them. I can see the messages that appear. They all kind of show up on my screen, and I can do my best to answer your questions. Now, this is important because I want to make sure that this workshop is useful for you. I want to make sure that I have opportunities to contextualize the material, the examples, the demos, whatever, all to what you're hoping to get out of it, and things that can actually help you on your projects that are coming up. So any questions you have right now about Quicksilver, feel free to throw them in. Any questions that come out throughout the workshop that you might have about Pantheon or Quicksilver, just throw them in the chat and I'll see them and be able to address them as soon as I can. So this is live workshop number 3, Automate and Integrate with Quicksilver. We do these every single month. Next week, we're going to be doing website performance, which is all about Varnish, Redis, and our performance monitoring tool, New Relic. We also have a Going Live Best Practices Clinic where we go through and cover some best practices, but reserve a lot of time for answering questions about going live or even just Pantheon in general, if you have any questions or concerns. And then every single Thursday, we go through getting started with Pantheon, the basics of using Pantheon. We actually just did that in the previous hour. You'll learn all about web ops and see a demo examples kind of going through using Pantheon's workflow to make changes to your website. And then on the next month on the first Thursday, we'll be going through a Terminus workshop. And Terminus is the name of our tool for interacting with Pantheon via your command line interface. So if you want to script out and automate things that might be a little bit boring or tedious for you right now, that you have to click buttons in the dashboard for, Terminus lets you do each of those things directly from your computer, and it makes it pretty easy to actually create scripts so that you don't have to do them manually anymore. So Pantheon is a website operations platform, and at a high level, WebOps streamlines how work is done through agile tools and processes. Well, Quicksilver is one of those agile tools. We're able to tap right into existing Pantheon workflow and run scripts. The scripts that we run can be up to you. You're able to write whatever scripts you want to integrate with whatever third-party API that you can imagine. This allows you to take existing tools that you're already using for other things and plug Pantheon into them. You unlock some automation in there because you're able to take an existing process that you're currently doing and have updates appear in Slack or in Asana or Jira. You can do your current thing in Pantheon and have automated tests run, or have your preferences, your settings, how you prefer to work in that environment restored every time that you overwrite the database or whatever you want like that. So there's so many options. We're going to be covering some basic ones. We're going to be starting actually by going through some examples of what you might want to do with Quicksilver during any given stage, any given workflow in the dashboard. The first workflow is making a multi-dev environment. So when you click that button to create a multi-dev, what should happen before or after that runs? I'm not going to touch on each one of these suggestions, these examples here, but I'm going to touch on a couple of the highlights. Maybe you want to enable some development modules. So in both Drupal and WordPress, but especially in Drupal, there's a common practice of disabling modules and plugins that you don't need on your live environment. Sometimes there are tools in place that you use to build out the functionality. In Drupal, there's even separate modules for UI for actually interacting with some of the functionality versus actually using the functionality, just in the best interest of performance and keeping things locked down from the end user making changes. And so for those reasons, when you go to do work in a multi-dev environment, if you're doing development work, you might want those modules enabled for you automatically. Otherwise, you have to go through an extra step, and maybe that doesn't seem like much, but if you spin up an extra multi-dev every day for like one for every ticket that you spin up to address, that just becomes really tedious. So it's pretty quick. You can write a plugin that will just go through and enable all of the development modules that you need on that particular site. There's another one in here for indexing your content in Solr. If you're using Solr, you have the site indexed for search, then some websites, there's a lot of content and it can take a very long time for the index to complete. If you're needing to do something with that in a multi-dev, then that's a process you have to start manually after the multi-dev is created. If you're not sure, or if you just want it to happen automatically, this can be a great tool to go in and automate the process of manually saying, okay, we spun up a new environment. Now let's re-index the site in this environment so that when we get to the process of interacting with search, it's just going to work and we don't have to debug that ourselves. Another workflow is committing code. So every time we click that button to commit code in the Pantheon dashboard, a really common one, the one that I really like a lot, is the first one, New Relic deployment marker. In New Relic, which again is a performance monitoring tool we have a partnership with, you can go in and see performance data over time, and you get these graphs that show you, performance at any given point for people that are visiting your website. Well, the deployment marker adds a line on that graph that shows exactly when a commit happened. And this is really important because it means if you're debugging some sort of performance problem, you can look back through the graph and see like, oh, that's interesting. This performance problem started right here where there's a line. What did we do in that commit that caused our performance to tank? And you can go back and look at the commit and then get that information. So if you're debugging problems especially, that can be really useful. Another one here that I think is just really cool is interacting with your project management system. This is one I sort of alluded to earlier, but if you're working with Jira or Asana or Trello or whatever it might be, you could say, every time that I write a commit that references a Jira ticket number, follows this pattern or whatever, then go to Jira ticket number, whatever, and leave my commit message there saying like, hey, a commit has been made associated with this ticket, and then put a link to it. That can be really cool. You don't have to go and manually update the ticket yourself. You can have the commit do it for you. So that's another example of something that you could set up. Another workflow here is cloning a database. Whenever you're taking, usually the database from live to some other environment, you could do things like import configuration. This is especially true in Drupal, but also possible with WordPress. But the Drupal configuration management system that's built into Drupal core is very, very powerful. It allows you to export all of your configuration into code. And that means that you can move configuration easily from dev to test to live. But what it also means is that you can sync your database from live to dev at any point. And yeah, you'll lose your configuration, but if you've been exporting it to code, you can then just import it again. And all of your configuration is right back where it was, but you get the benefit of having all of the changes that have happened in live. And some of these development cycles can take a while. Sometimes it might be a day or a week. Sometimes it could be a month or even a quarter before you have an opportunity to actually, finish the work that you're building in this environment. So being able to sync up from the live environment to get all that fresh content and all the stuff in there can be really valuable for debugging issues before they actually get pushed up. Now, being able to automate the process of importing configuration can be really, really nice, because it means that you take all the configuration you exported and just automatically overwrite the database on that environment so that you don't have to manually do it yourself. So saves you a step, but it makes it so that you can do a little bit more. Another example that's pretty popular is sanitizing usernames, or really sanitizing any information that you want to protect. So you could say, we are, HIPAA compliant, or actually, I don't know if that's a great example because I don't know the ins and outs of it, but for privacy reasons, we can only allow this particular information to exist on live, and it cannot exist on other environments. So we could say, okay, well, when we clone the database, after we clone into dev, go through the database, wipe out all the customer information that has this particular information in it, or even better, replace that information with something that's anonymous, just some standard or randomized text or something, so that it doesn't break anything on the website, but we can tell that it was, randomized info. And that allows you to stay compliant and allows you to respect the privacy of the folks who have requested that. Another workflow is clearing the cache. So there's a button in the dashboard, in the Pantheon dashboard, to clear the cache. You push it and it does what it says it does. And it clears it not just on the Drupal or WordPress website itself, but it actually pushes that out to our CDN, so that our global CDN, where your cached website is saved, also forces a clear across those. And part of that already happens automatically if you clear the cache within Drupal or WordPress, but this gives you a button in the dashboard to do it for you. Well, one really popular workflow that to incorporate at this point is clearing a CDN if you're not using our global CDN. So if you're using something like Cloudflare, or you have your own custom instance of something spun up, you can trigger a clear on your own custom system using that. But I think the way that this gets used most commonly is actually the second one there, for debugging other scripts. Because all of the other workflows we've talked about up to this point have been pretty manual processes, right? Like you make a commit, you have to wait a few minutes. You create a multi-dev environment, you have to wait a few minutes. You have to, doing a deployment, you have to wait a few minutes. And you have to like create fake commits or things if you're debugging an integration, for this. So the way that this helps is that by saying, if I'm creating an integration with Slack and I want to test that the integration is working, I want to see what info I'm sending to Slack, and I want to see what information I'm getting back from Slack, then what you can do is just assign this script to the clearing the cache workflow. And then every time you click that button, it will do its payload. It'll go out and send the information, you'll receive the information back, and then you've tested it properly. So then once you're confident everything is working, you're verified that that information you're getting back is useful and it's what you're looking for, then you can actually assign this to the correct workflow, whatever that might be. And this just helps make the process of creating the script a little bit easier. Now, another one, this is the last one that we're covering, is a workflow for whenever a new site is created. This is one that you would assign to a custom upstream. So in Pantheon, we have default upstreams for WordPress core, Drupal core, and other versions of Drupal within them. But you can create your own custom upstream that is your own starting code base. And it might be WordPress with your own flavor, with your own customizations, or it could be with your own set of plugins or your own custom themes or whatever. And the benefit of a custom upstream is you're able to roll out changes to a mass of sites at once without having to go to each one individually. The dashboard will update to show, hey, this upstream's updated, and all you have to do is click a button to apply the update to that site. So this is cool. But with this workflow, you can actually assign additional things to happen when a site is created from your custom upstream. So universities, for example, use this pretty commonly because they have to keep very tight control over how their brand is used. And a lot of times they'll use this because they want groups or departments or small teams or whatever to be able to spin up websites on demand, but they come preloaded with the logo and with the theme, the default theme, branding guidelines and all that stuff. And so they can set this up to say, hey, every time that a new website's created, notify the admins, just let us know so we can keep track of it. We can add it to our files or whatever and make sure that everything is okay. And notifications can be whatever way you want, like a Slack notification, SMS, an email, whatever you'd like to do. So the way that you assign a specific script to a workflow is with the pantheon.yaml file. If you haven't experimented with pantheon.yaml yet, it's where you can configure all sorts of things on Pantheon, including most recently the version of MariaDB, the database that you're using, which is important for certain versions of Drupal. You can configure the version of PHP that you're using. So if you want to jump ahead of what you're currently on by default, if you want to go back to something older, you can update that. But there's also in there the ability to define a workflow and assign a script to that workflow. So this says workflows deploy. Deploy is the name of our deployment workflow. And then we say after, because we can define, do we want the script to run before the script completes or after the script completes? Or I guess before the script runs versus after it's totally done running. And so we tell it which one we want. In this case, we're saying after. And then we just pick the type. We say description. We put in whatever text we want for that. And then the script. And this will point to a path in Pantheon where you have put this file. In this case, it's a PHP file within the private directory. So we'll take a look at that in just a minute, but that is where we suggest putting it by default, because everything in the private directory is not web accessible. So things that you put in the private folder, people on the internet won't be able to see. So if you need to include credentials, or you need to include scripts that maybe you just don't want people to know that that's there, you can include it in the private directory, and then that's just fine. So we recommend putting your Quicksilver scripts in there. Each Quicksilver script does have to be completed within 120 seconds or it will time out. So it's important to make sure that whatever script you're writing is able to create or complete the conversation with the third-party API within 2 minutes. You do have access to our environment variables, so post, server, and env, which can be good if you're trying to make a script that you can reuse on other sites. So I've given case studies in the past about Google Apogee, being able to scale up to, work with literally thousands of websites. Well, if you're using our environment variables, you can go in and grab the information about the site, name of the site, the plan that it's on, credentials for the database, different things like that. You can grab those out of the environment variables and plug them into your script that you're creating so that you don't have to manually write a Quicksilver script for every site that you use. You can create it a little bit more generically using these variables, and then literally just include it. Just bring that plugin or bring the Quicksilver script with you wherever you're going for every website you're working on. And this is great because it creates a consistent workflow for your team. So as you're going through, as you are working on one site, maybe you switch to well, I need to switch gears to work on this other site that my team's working on. Knowing that it will always work the same way is good. It makes a consistent process that people expect. And hopefully the things that you're adding with Quicksilver will be beneficial. So you're helping by making it this way and applying it to all the sites you're interacting with. Now, we do recommend putting it in the private folder, like I said, within your Git repo, or just within the code folder if you're doing it through SFTP. We do recommend keeping API keys in a private JSON file. And if you're interested in this, I will share the link with you in the chat here. But we do have a Terminus plugin that allows you to manage a secrets.json file, which can help make the process just a little bit easier for adding your API keys, calling them back out, interacting, managing that file directly. So that is what we recommend for putting it there. And you will need a API key of some sort for most third-party APIs that you're interacting with, just to validate that you do actually have permission to post in the place that you're trying to post, or to use the service that they're offering. So you should expect to need that. Now, there are many ways that you can debug Quicksilver scripts. My favorite right here is the Terminus workflow watch. It will continually watch for a change in workflows, either when starting or stopping, and notify you in your command line interface. So for example, let me actually open up my command line interface right here. Let me exit full screen on my presentation. Let me pull my command prompt into the screen here. Yeah, full screen, why not? Let's make it a little bit bigger so it's easier. Oops, so I made it full screen, but I forgot that it makes the whole thing a little bit wonky. So there we go. So I have this running. Now I need to authenticate with Terminus. So let me do Terminus auth login, and then define my email address. So the, oops, David Needham at Git Pantheon. Oh, I have a typo right there. So you do get logged out of Terminus after 24 hours. So this is just a thing you have to do to re-authenticate with your token. From there, we can do a Terminus workflow :watch, and we can say Pantheon weekly demo site, just like that, and run. So now it is watching for workflows in our Pantheon weekly demo site. Now I still have it open from earlier. If I click the button to clear caches, it will start the workflow that we can see from right here. And if I jump back here from our command line interface, let's wait just a moment. We'll see it pretty soon saying it started the workflow for clearing the cache. There we go. And then it will say that it completed or finished the workflow. And I have a simple Quicksilver script in place that will go out and query an API to generate a dad joke. And we'll see it here in our workflow. So there we go, it finished. Each one of these workflow operations has a UUID, unique identifier for that workflow, and then also the description. So the best dad joke we got today is I finally bought the limited edition thesaurus that I've always wanted. When I opened it, all the pages were blank. I have no words to describe how angry I am. Yep, that is certainly a dad joke. Okay, so that's an example. Taking a look at the Quicksilver debugging script, like how you actually debug a script is you would do that. You'd run Quicksilver workflow watch, and then the name of the site that you're working with. And then anything that you print in your script, anything that you echo in your script will show up in the Pantheon workflow log like this. So that the dad joke that was put there is something that I echoed from the script, and it automatically shows up there. So as you're creating this interaction with your third-party API, you might want to echo the payload you're about to send off, the thing that you get back, the response to that, just to see if, oh, did I format this correctly? Or what format is the thing that I received in? How do I need to interact with that to make it work for what I'm trying to use it for? And so you get that information, you can echo it, you can see it. And if you tie it to the clear cache button, it's easy to click that as many times as you want and actually see firsthand if it's working correctly. And then, before you go, you can clear that up and, remove any echoes that you don't want in there. And it'll help you out in the long term to see exactly where things are happening at. The other ones are also just variations on that. You can see the list of various workflows that have happened over time, and then you can dig down and get even more information about a specific workflow if you define the ID. All right, and we have an examples repo, a relatively large examples repo, not infinite. There's still a lot to be done in here, but let me share the link to this with you. With this workflow or with this examples repo, you can get started pretty quickly with a lot of our most common operations. So a lot of these include things like visual regression testing, talking to communications tools like HipChat or Slack. They include things like visual regression testing. There's a few different visual regression testing options in here. But I'm actually going to talk about a couple that are a little bit simpler than that, just for the sake of example. If we jump into the DB sanitization option, this is one of the examples that I talked about earlier. If we want to sanitize the database for whatever reason, before or after any one of our workflows, it's pretty easy to do that. Each one of these examples starts with a title and a description, so we can see exactly what it is that we're trying to accomplish with this. And then there are instructions. So as it says here, we add, we pick one, either Drupal or WordPress. We add it to our site within the private directory. We go to our pantheon.yaml file and modify it, and then we add this code in it. And you'll be sure to switch out if it's Drupal or WordPress here. But this allows you to say, after clone database, go out to the private folder, go into, it looks like it actually prescribes here a folder for scripts as well, and then run this file. And if we take a look at the file, if we open up the Drupal one, it's very, very simple stuff. So it is if, and then we're saying if we're in Pantheon, basically, if defined Pantheon environment that won't be present in a local environment, for example, or on another hosting provider, and Pantheon environment does not equal live. I hope I don't have to tell you how important this line is, because you do not want to sanitize the database on your live environment. That would be catastrophic for many people. So if you are on Pantheon and you're not on live, then we echo some sort of helper things that show up in the workflow log, so you can see them there. We're sanitizing the database, and then we do a pass-through command. And with pass-through, we're able to run things like Drush or WP CLI directly from a script like this. It'll do some other things with operations you might typically run on a server as well. But here we're doing a Drush, or a pass-through, Drush SQL sanitize, and I believe by default, this command will sanitize email addresses for users who have registered for the website. So that's the default. You're welcome to customize this however you want. There are additional flags and settings you can include with Drush to do that. And then once it's done, we echo database sanitization complete. So if you go back and look at the WordPress example, unfortunately, there is not a WP CLI equivalent to what Drush provides for Drupal. However, it starts the same way. And then we start by bootstrapping WordPress. We say require once, WP load, and then we define that variable to get started. So then we say, okay, database query. We basically just write a database query here that says, update the WP users, so the people who have accounts, and set email address to, and then concatenate something user login at localhost. So the information isn't gone, it's being replaced with something different. So So that works. It's effectively accomplishing the same thing. It just requires you to know a little bit more about the database query that's happening under the hood. But this is also really kind of cool because it gives you the flexibility to do whatever you want, even beyond the example that this was originally defined for. So that's one example. Another example that I like to include, if I can find it, is, let's see, the Drush config one is very similar. It's also using a Drush command, but I'm realizing we're almost at time. So why don't we move on? Like I said, there are lots of examples in here. Each one of them is defined. Like if you want Slack, there's instructions on here on exactly what you need to do to get it set up with links and all that stuff. And then information down here, you just include or exclude whichever ones that you actually want. So if you did not want it to tell you after site creation or multi-dev, you just delete those sections and that's fine. All right. So that is, let's see, I want to make sure we have lots of time for questions. So if you do have any questions, if there's anything that you're still not quite sure about with regards to Quicksilver, how you can use it, how to get started, please do put it in your chat window. I'll be able to see that and can reply and try to help you out now on the air. Now, other things, though, we are sort of wrapping up. We're moving into the time for questions and for our feedback and more resources link. So let me share a link to that in all of the places that we're sharing information. Let me go back to LinkedIn as well. There we go, friends, on LinkedIn. You have a link to more resources. So from this more resources page, let me open this up. We actually want the new one for live workshop number 3. We start with a recording of the last time that we gave this workshop. We want to make it very easy for someone if you miss this workshop or down the road. Basically, after this weekend, this video will show up here on the page. So you should always be able to find a video of a recent time this workshop was given directly on the page for more resources. It'll be the most recent one, so that's hopefully really helpful for you. We do also have a link here for more feedback because, as I mentioned at the beginning, feedback is very important to me because we want to make sure that we are always improving. The most important thing to me is making sure that this workshop is useful for you. So I try my best to address every single concern that's brought up in feedback. So if there's anything at all that we can improve or make better over time, please let us know with feedback. And then also, if there's anything that worked particularly well, if you enjoyed the workshop, let us know that too, because that is also very, very important. Now, we do also have more resources. We have the link here to the example repository, which is the one that I shared with you earlier to take a look at the Quicksilver examples. There's a doc to automate and integrate, which covers the basics of what I talked about here today on the air. And then we have a blog post, which actually goes through an even more advanced example to post Drush site audits to Slack. Because if you can imagine, like these things can be interacting with each other. You can make them plug into each other. So you can say, whenever I do something, whenever I deploy to live or deploy to test or whatever, run a Drush site audit and then post the results of that over to our Slack channel for this project. All these things are possible. There's so many different ways that these things can be combined. It's just really, really cool. And then there are ways you can keep learning after today. We do have a private, I guess maybe it's not private. We do have a forum dedicated to questions about this particular class or an opportunity to get feedback on Quicksilver scripts that maybe you're creating yourself. It's a great place to go to post things like that because we will see it, we'll get notified, and we can help you debug your script. It also lets other people see your script and maybe they can make use of it or can share their feedback with it about it as well. And we also have the rest of the Drupal, the Pantheon community through Slack in a forum. We have support. If you have any problem with Pantheon directly, you can always open up the support tab, go to chat, and you'll see help there. And then Pantheon office hours every Wednesday, 1 p.m. Central. We love to get questions like this about Quicksilver in there because it is such an underutilized feature, but it's so, so powerful. So many cool things to be unlocked with Quicksilver. So if you have any questions or concerns that you don't want to address today, or if you want to help debugging that script or something like that, you can always come to Pantheon office hours every Wednesday, 1 p.m. Central. You'll join a Zoom room. That's like just a regular Zoom room. You can unmute, ask your question, and we'll do our best to help you in that hour. Now, we do also have additional Pantheon training resources. So if you prefer to learn in other ways that are not live instruction like this, if you want guides that will walk you through the process, if you want private instruction or advanced topics that go above and beyond this course, you can always go to the resources page and sign up for something like that. All right, checking, make sure that we don't have any questions. I'm not seeing anything, so I think I'll just wrap it up here then. Thank you all very much for attending the Quicksilver workshop today. I genuinely hope it was useful. Thanks in advance for leaving feedback because it is very, very important. I hope that you learned something today. I hope you got something out of it, and I hope to see you around the community. I'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.